And welcome to Whiskey Politics. Dave Sussman here, your host and purveyor at whiskeypolitics.net and America's Voice News. You can find us at americasvoice.news. That's the new website, americasvoice.news. Check us out, and you can also find us over at Roku and Apple TV and Amazon and Android and everywhere you can access. Download the program, watch it. It's fantastic news. In fact, speaking of fantastic news, we just got back from Freedom Fest in Las Vegas, a 4-day event, the Libertarian Center of the Universe. We met some incredible people, sat on some great panels, met some fantastic free market, free mind thinkers, and we broadcast live for America's Voice News as well. And today's show is going to be a kind of a recap of some of our interviews that we did. We're going to have a couple of episodes like this. But we're really excited right now because what we're talking about isn't just, Trump and the economy and politics, but also about culture and what's going on with people waking up. They call the left woke, right? I think people on the right have woken up and they really have an idea of what's going on. They've got their thumb on the pulse of what we're hearing in the news. We just got through the Mueller hearings, for example. And I think the left right now are bereavement syndrome. It's really sad when you take a look at what they just went through yesterday. If you took a look at the nightly news last night, it looked like the night of the presidential election in 2016. I know, a little bit of Schadenfreude right now, but I think if you take a look at the mainstream news, they were putting all of their money into Mueller, and it was a disaster for them. And we talked about that today on America's Voice Live. So you always want to go check that out as well. It's great news. So today we're going to show you some of our favorite, and all of our interviews were favorites, but this is just a short list of some of the folks that we got coming up here. We've got George Gilder who's joining us, and we've had him on before on the show, but he encapsulates everything he talks about with life after Google, a fascinating, brilliant mind. We have Candace Owens. Needs no introduction, Candace Owens. We caught her in the back dungeons of Freedom Fest. It was very, very hard for nobody got an interview with Candace Owens at Freedom Fest except America's Voice News. We're very, very fortunate to do that. We also sat down and had a good discussion with John Stossel. He shares an interesting story about his son and getting involved in politics. And it's a good lesson for all of us parents who are watching their kids grow, and how to really get them to open their eyes to what's going on. We also have Grover Norquist talking about the economy. And we also talk about art and culture with Michael Ramirez, famed Pulitzer Prize winning Michael Ramirez. So stay tuned. We're going to be right back here and enjoy the interviews from America's Voice News at Freedom Fest 2019. We'll be right back. And Dave Sussman back with you live at Freedom Fest for America's Voice News. Delighted to be here and joined again by Mr. George Gilder, the author of Life After Google. And for those that are watching us that haven't seen our interview on America's Voice News, we had an hour sit down at Caltech a couple of months ago.
Yeah, that was great.
It was a fantastic interview.
I made a big mistake by about 10 to the 300s, but apart from
Xenotypes.
Slight error.
Yeah.
Xenobytes.
So folks, Life After Google, an incredible book. Prescient, talking about think about the term, first of all, Life After Google. And that right there, your mind would explode. But tell us a little bit about what you're doing here at Freedom Fest this week, Mr. George Gilder.
I'm doing 6 appearances. Yesterday I talked about China. I've gotten deeply involved in preventing the U.S. from making a tragic mistake of treating China as some sort of adversary that we have to exclude from our economy. I mean, Chris Wray, the chief of the FBI, has declared that China is doing an all-society war against us, and only an all-society response can succeed. And he believes that Chinese students in American colleges, Chinese workers in American technology plants, Chinese CEOs of American companies are somehow a threat. And that Huawei epitomizes China's communist overreach and aggression. And Huawei is, in fact, one of the great companies in the world, and its leader is the son of a capitalist roader. His name's Ren Zhengfei. He's inspirational capitalist force in China, and he's making the best telecom gear in the world, and he's the pioneer of 5G. And we're really greatly restricting our economy by refusing to work with Huawei to implement 5G in the United States. That's the next generation of wireless, hundreds of times more capacious and low latency.
For our viewers that are not familiar with this, why has the United States marginalized Huawei? I mean, we're talking about intellectual property theft, but weren't they actually putting some of their products with some spyware? Is that what was said?
That's what people say. I mean, this is there were 1 billion breaches of personal data on the internet last year. 1 billion breaches.
Right.
Every technology producer in the world today suffers from the catastrophic lack of security on the internet. So everybody's gear is being manipulated and exploited. But Huawei and Ren is eager to solve this problem. It's a technical problem of creating a secure architecture for the internet for the next generation, and developing a 5G that's transparent and ultimately based on the blockchain. I've been talking at Huawei actually in the last month, trying to get them to understand blockchain, and they're increasingly interested and enthusiastic. So there are all sorts of ways to deal with the so-called threat of which really I think is the paranoia that has resulted from a porous pyramid of the internet, where all the money and power and data rises to the top, and everybody feels they're being exploited, and everyone feels vulnerable.
This is one of the things that you really focus a lot on in Life After Google, and that is the Life After Google is essentially blockchain. Yeah. Tell us a little bit about that from the standpoint, because when people hear blockchain, they think of a Bitcoin or other monetary currencies, internet currencies. But tell us exactly what is blockchain.
Well, blockchain is really what used to be called a unity. It's a new technology that addresses a whole array of different problems together in a kind of convergent new generation of technology. And there are two big crises, I think, in the world right now. One is the crisis of internet security, which gets worse the more money we spend on post-hack patches and other such false remedies. The other great crisis is the scandal of money, where we now currency trading is $5.1 trillion a day. That's 70 times or more all the trade in goods and services. And it doesn't even stop trade wars and monetary crises and confusions. So we have two great crises, and both of them can be remedied by the creation of a new global database. It's a global, immutable, time-stamped database, which is designed for shared state, as they call it in computer science. Shared state. It means everybody around the world will always have a correct and unimpeachable record to which they can repair. And that is really what the blockchain is. And you can build money on it.
Right.
You can build cryptocurrencies on it. You can build a new architecture for the internet that's secure and stable on it, that doesn't allow all the data to rise to a few.
And you purport this takes care of the privacy concerns we have right now.
The privacy concerns too are really a misconception. Where it just isn't the problem. The problem isn't privacy. The problem is private ownership of your own data and your own personal identity and your own ability to do transactions across the internet without stripping yourself naked before the camera in order to establish your
Right. So in the last couple of minutes here, Mr. George Gilder, how does this transition happen? When we open up our internet or our phone right now on our computers or whatever it may be, we have a browser, we go to this. What does blockchain look like?
Well, blockchain means that that you have an identity which is consists of a private key and a public key, and all the various web providers across the internet have to respect and address your public key. And when you transact with them, you use your private key. This means no longer do you have to have a username, password, combination for different one for each of the thousands of entities you might transact with across the internet. Those entities respect your single identity. Mm-hmm. Like your DNA is unique and your private key is unique, and you use that. Now, and it combines anonymity where you need it, so you don't have to disclose so much personal data in order to operate on the internet. But it also gives you attestation.
Right.
And that means that you can, if you're attacked by the government or some corporation claims you've broken a contract or some other claim is made against you, you have a perfectly unimpeachable, time-stamped record of what you actually did. And this is what's really crucial to privacy, that you can document that you didn't evade taxes, didn't sell the wrong drugs or whatever it is that is being, or didn't break the contract.
Mr. George Gilder, find out more about and check out our interview. By the way, Whiskey Politics on America's Voice News. You can find that everywhere with Mr. George Gilder. He goes straight more into this, great detail. Check out Life After Google. Fascinating book. It will literally blow your mind. Yeah. Thank you for joining us, sir. And we look forward to having you on our panel on Saturday.
Yeah. And also, the COSM conference in Seattle is where all this is going to...
Where can people find that real quickly?
That's COSM, www.cosm.technology.
Perfect.
COSM.technology.
Check it out, folks. We'll be right back here at at America's Voice News here at Freedom Fest 2019.
And welcome back to America's Voice News. Dave Sussman here at Freedom Fest 2019, and we are backstage in the cavernous backstage of the Paris Hotel with Candace Owens. Candace, thanks for joining us, first of all.
Thank you. It's been a long time.
It has been a long time. So, first of all, talk a little bit about what you're talking about today at the Libertarian Center of the Universe.
I've just been kind of talking about what I always speak about, which is just how a lot of these leftist arguments are harming the minority community, or at least their goals, what they're trying to accomplish, would directly impact the black community. We've been debating a lot of those topics, like open borders, which to me is probably up there among the most radical concept that I've heard introduced by them. Just trying to give a voice and connect with people to make them understand what we're actually up against and what we're fighting for in this country.
You know, one of the things that we've talked about before, which I think is really important, is when you take a look at the numbers in the inner city community of single-parent households before the Great Society in the 1960s, and today you see a 300% increase in single-family households, especially in urban cities, black families. Are they getting the message? I know that you're talking a lot about Blexit, and you've been focused on that the last couple of years. What are you hearing back from the community?
They're definitely getting the message. I think I've spawned a lot of other Candace Owenses. If you're following online, you're seeing a lot more black conservative voices come to the forefront using whatever means they have, whether that's Instagram, Facebook, having their own shows. It's been tremendous to see. And I think what it really took was just somebody going out there and saying it and taking all the bullets to make it okay to think differently, because we're not just thinking differently, we're thinking accurately, right? The truth is on our side. So our job, beyond being called a bunch of terrible things and being mischaracterized by the leftist media, is pretty easy. We just have to get the truth to our community, and then once you're awake, you don't go back to sleep.
Speaking about being awake, right now, everything in our politics is identity politics, and we're seeing this with the Ilhan Omars and the AOCs of the world. You think this is good for the Democratic Party, or is this really helping out the conservatives?
It's helping out the conservatives, 100%. They've overplayed their hand in every single regard. People are tired of it. People don't even have a reaction to the word racist anymore, and that's what happens when you call everyone and everything racist. And we're seeing that just in regards to the fact that despite them labeling everybody racist over the last 2 years, black support for Donald Trump has minimally doubled. Every poll acknowledges that. It has gone up. So that means that their rhetoric isn't working, and yet they're just doubling and tripling down and quadrupling down in the very same metric. So I think it's great. More power to them. Keep calling everybody racist. You know, it really worked in 2016 when you called half America racist. Go ahead and call 80% of America racist in 2020. Let me know how it works out.
You had an incredible experience in Congress earlier this year when Ted Lieu brought up the picture, and you talk about that a little bit as well, about the media's reaction to that as well, because we talk about media bias all the time, and how they responded to what most people thought was an incredible performance by you. People were cheering.
You know, I thank God for that moment in Congress. I thank God that Ted Lieu did that, as asinine as it was, because it woke up so many black Americans emailed me and apologized, because it was, you know, I think the most watched C-SPAN clip of all time.
Yes.
And what ended up happening is they went and they saw my testimony, they saw what I said, they saw what I accused Ted Lieu of. I intentionally said to him, you played that clip because you think black people are too stupid to go pursue it in its entirety. And what happened was black people went and pursued that in its entirety and saw how he was trying to misconstrue me. And what that lets them do is once they see that they're able to do it to one person, it's not a hard leap of imagination to think about how they might be doing it to Donald Trump, how they might be doing it to all Republicans for the last 60 years. And that's all I'm ever trying to do is create that crack, you know, that crack in the mirror, and then watch the whole mirage of the Democrat Party fall apart.
My last question on this, and again, greatly appreciate you taking the time with us here. The media reaction to that. I don't feel like the message came out what you said in the mainstream media. They didn't report it in a way where I felt like it had the valid weight of what you said. Talk about the media, talk about the bias that we're seeing right now. Is it just getting worse, or is it my imagination?
It might seem like it's getting worse if you're just paying attention to mainstream media. Their coverage of it wasn't great, but nobody's really watching them anymore. That's kind of the point, right? Yeah. People are pursuing alternative means and listening to other opinions and dissenting voices, and we have all the power now, and they know that, and that's why they're so desperate to assassinate our characters. So I say more power to them. I don't get upset about it. They are desperate, and I think what we're seeing now happen on the left is the last squeals of a dying animal.
Last time you were on my show, you kind of teased us that Blexit was coming without naming the term Blexit. Anything you can tease us with now? Anything coming up for Candace Owens?
Nope. Everything's out now. You know, we've got the Blexit movement going. I can tease you. I have a book coming out.
Please, tell us about it.
It will offend people, that's for sure. The title in and of itself will offend people. It'll really get them going. They don't know what to do with me. So that should be coming in February of next year.
The title, you're not going to tell us?
No. I always just tease, and then you say something's coming. So
okay, all right. Candace Owens, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for everything that you do on behalf of so many Americans. They love what you do. Continue to stay strong, and we look forward to maybe having you on again long form next time. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
All right, thanks. And folks, we'll be right back here at America's Voice News, live from right in the heart of the Libertarian Beast, Freedom Fest. Thanks. We'll be right back.
And welcome back to to Freedom Fest 2019. Dave Sussman here with America's Voice News, and I'm delighted and honored to be sitting with John Stossel. You can find John Stossel at Reason TV, your show.
No. You can find it there.
Yes, you can.
Stossel TV.
And Stossel TV.
Only 20% of the views are via Reason.
You're so focused on views right now. Last time we spoke here at Freedom Fest a couple of years ago, you were like, you said that was your son involved, and he was like, just you guys are exploding online now.
Well, he convinced me that a lot of I've become a born-again free market zealot. This prosperity is what makes lives better. We know how to get there, and after I was no longer a socialist winning journalism awards and I became a capitalist, I wanted to explain this to kids. And my son said, they're not going to believe you when you're on Fox. And you don't need Fox because you've got Facebook, you got a million Twitter followers, you got social media reach. You can do that. So I raised money from some sympathetic people, and we do a new video, release one every Tuesday.
Wow, that's fantastic. And you're getting some incredible view numbers as well, from what I understand.
More than I was getting on my Fox Business show.
That's
so
amazing.
We're reaching
And John Stossel
somebody.
goes back decades, kids. He was on ABC going back with Hugh Downs in 2020 and all those guys, right? So thank you for joining us real quickly here. So a couple of major issues. This is a libertarian, conservative, right of center conference. And, I'm looking at the news this morning, John, and I'm seeing $22.5 trillion in national debt. Okay. The conservatives are running the Senate. We've got the White House, and we had Congress for 2 years before they turned over in 2018. What the heck is going on in Washington right now with fiscal responsibility?
I don't know why you say right now. It's really never been better. It's never been good. It's Republicans when they get elected want to spend too.
Yeah.
And some of these guys were fiscal hawks until Republicans came to power. It's pretty disgusting. And one of my new videos coming up, we're doing a tally of everybody's plans. Nobody's done that, to my surprise, compared to how much Trump has promised to spend versus Biden, who was the low on the list. And the top three, no surprise, are the socialists and two of the female presidential candidates. I'm not going to give it away who the biggest spender is until the video comes out. But it's astonishing that Biden would spend twice as much as Trump, but these other candidates would spend 40 times as much as Trump is proposing to.
So I assume that's going to take into account the new Green Deal and some of these other big stimulus packages.
Green New Deal and Medicare for All are some of the biggest things, but also free college, forgiving all student debt.
You're somebody that's always advocated private as opposed to public programs because you believe that free markets competition has always lowered the cost overall competition.
Though I haven't always advocated that when I was a young consumer reporter. I fought that.
Okay, but we're seeing something, and this hasn't even changed since you and I sat down a couple of years ago here at Freedom Fest, and that is this shift towards socialism that is just gaining ground right now. What is going on in people's perception of what socialism is and isn't?
Well, AOC is cute. She has good skin, and she never says And so when she says free stuff, make us all equal, it's always been appealing, but now there are some good messengers.
Okay.
And our side has been lousy at explaining why socialism not only makes people poor, but it often leads to violence, because instead of markets setting prices, politicians do. And that may mean they take your business.
So are you happy with I guess this Trump administration has been somewhat antagonistic to regulatory state. They're repealing regulations.
That. And I think that I don't like Trump. He's a baby. Look at me, like a 2-year-old. You're supposed to outgrow that narcissism when you're an adult. And personally, he's just repugnant to me. But I love the deregulators he's appointed. I don't know how he knew to appoint them. But for the first time, signals are being sent to business that if you create something new, we're not going to crush you. I assume that's why the market's up, not because of the tax cut, which was a mixed bag. But just this message that we're not looking to crush you.
So you think that leads to small business optimism then?
Yes.
Okay. And people are then more likely to spend more and expand their business, hire more?
And try things. That ability to innovate without saying, Mommy, may I, is what gave us stuff like this, iPhones, and all the good things we have now.
Yeah, yeah. So from your standpoint, and we're taking a look at, and going back to the idea of socialism and the youth, okay? And it's the millennials and the next generation, Gen Z, I think they're called, right after them. And they're coming on with this idea that everybody is entitled to free things, free stuff, free education, colleges, we were just talking about, housing. And how do you change that perspective? I know you're working really hard with your show at Salsal TV, but how do you get the message out? What we're doing?
Well, what do you want from me? That's what I'm doing once a week, 5 minutes
Right.
to reach those kids and explain that, yeah, minimum wage helps some people who still have jobs, but the person who didn't quite have the skills now is not going to get a job. We'll show that, yeah, the rich could pay more in taxes, but if you took all rich people's money, there wouldn't be enough to pay for the programs that they're promising now. And people who spend a little more time looking at it get less enthusiastic about socialism.
Well, they have to take a look at it, though. They have to be educated,
But
right?
over time, and as the presidential race approaches, don't you think
Yeah.
they will?
You would hope so. You would hope so, but it's about educating, and people like yourself. And from what if you take a look at mainstream media, you're few and far between on mainstream media and the news.
Yeah.
All right. Now you came from a news background. When you take a look at your former employer, ABC, or others major networks in the mainstream news, has it changed? Are they as biased as they appear these days, or has it always been this way?
It's always been that way. And at least now they know there's a bunch of people who have different opinions now that you have Fox and other
Right.
alternatives. It used to be, oh, we're just middle of the road, as they gave their leftist opinions. Peter Jennings, when he would see me in the hall at ABC, would do this. Suddenly turn his head away, like I was this
Really?
embarrassment to the company. I was the only guy in the building with an opinion. Everybody else was just reporting
You work with
the
Barbara
news.
Walters as well, right?
Right.
How did she approach you?
And Hugh Downs was actually kind of libertarian.
Yeah.
And Barbara was open-minded about this stuff.
Okay.
She wasn't all smug and confident in her belief that more government regulation was the answer to everything.
Okay.
In fact,
So-
she once at a meeting said, "Boy, Lynn Sure, we can't have a law for everything."
Really? Wow. So, okay, so from my perspective, if I see her on, what's the show that she's on with the women? The View. Right? She comes
created.
on, she doesn't like this president, she doesn't like generally most of those women on there are conservatives, okay? It's an ABC show, I think?
Yes.
Okay. So, but you're saying that hasn't changed. That's not new. The perspective from myself or those right of center are saying everything's now biased. It's always been that way?
Yes, Walter Cronkite leaned left, Huntley and Brinkley. They all live in New York, and it's the water they swim in. Everybody agrees
Right.
abortion should be legal. Obviously, we need more safety regulations and more gun control and more of these government helping victims programs that don't work but that sound good and leftists like.
Yeah, yeah. From a couple of minutes here left. From where we are right now, we're kind of in between election years, 2019, massive election coming up. Everybody's just going to be firing everything up against the wall. What are some of the biggest threats, and what do you see as some of the biggest opportunities right now for libertarianism and, more free market thinkers?
I hope they'll come out of the next Libertarian Party convention. I voted for Gary Johnson last time. In New York, Larry Sharp, I thought, was a popular candidate, was going to do well. He speaks really well. He was polling at something like 12% at one point. He got 1% of the vote. People don't want to vote for a libertarian. It's a two-party country. I just hope we'll have some gridlock so they won't do too much damage.
So does that mean that you would prefer to continue having Nancy as Speaker of the House and a McConnell Senate? You approve
Don't
of
lock me down that way, but gridlock is good. Yes.
But you say you approve of Trump's policies, although you find the man atrocious.
Yes.
So you would vote for a Donald Trump based upon the last 4 years?
Over all the Democrats who are running so far.
Right. Well, the Democratic Party is not the Democratic Party anymore, are they?
It's the take control of your life and government will decide for you and take your money party.
Yet they have a contingent. They have a constituency out there, don't they?
Yeah. People like that. People who I was one of them until I really saw how the government solutions fail, and fail is too generous because they make things worse.
So that's the biggest challenge, I think, for our time right now.
Yes.
And you're steering this massive oil tanker, and the question is, who do you want steering this thing? And going back to the $22.5 trillion that you're so frustrated and angry about right now, do the conservatives have the ability to decrease that, to pull it back a little bit, or is it just slowing down what the Democrats want?
I don't know. Some conservatives do want to shrink it, but they certainly haven't acted that way when they were in power.
Okay. All right. So
So far we're doing fine.
Yeah.
But you can stretch your rubber band so far. At some point, it's going to break.
Do you see that imminent, or is it another 10, 20 years of punching the ball down the road?
I've successfully predicted 2 of the last 15 recessions. So, yes, I see it as imminent, but I've been wrong about this before.
Right.
I'm expecting massive inflation any day now, and that's why I bought some gold and Bitcoin. But it really hasn't happened.
Yeah.
It will. It has to.
We had Peter Schiff on earlier. He's been calling for inflation for 10 years, massive inflation.
Right. He also was early.
Yeah.
But how are you going to... I rudely refuse to die, and I'm old. And my generation wants Medicare and Social Security. How is your generation possibly going to pay for all of us? It's not even complicated math. It's just arithmetic. The money isn't there. Government's going to have to print much more money.
But that devalues it. Do you believe gold standard?
I am aware that the survey of economists overwhelmingly, they do not believe in it. But I did one video on Steve Forbes' argument for why we should have one, so I see both sides.
Yeah, you do. Last question for you, and I greatly appreciate you taking the time. Minimum wage. Congress is pushing this, or the Democrats in Congress are pushing a national minimum wage. They want to go from $7.25 an hour. I think this is $25 to $15 an hour.
Right.
We've seen it in certain cities, Seattle, other cities as well, that the small businesses are now having to leave because they can't afford to pay their minimum wage workers twice of what they're really earning. Talk about what we see right now with minimum wage.
Seattle was the first city to go to 15, and Seattle's doing okay. But if you look at the chart of new hires, entry-level workers, it was going up in Washington. It still is going up in Washington, but it stopped in Seattle. It cut off jobs for new entry-level workers, and that's what it does. You set a minimum, some companies are going to automate or hire fewer people.
See it in Los Angeles, we see it in other cities as well, mostly blue governance cities. Don't people learn? Don't they see what's happening in these cities? We before camera, we talked about the homeless encampments and the drugs and the defecation in the streets of San Francisco. I know you recently did a piece on that. Why aren't people waking up to this?
I don't know, Dave. It's frustrated me. Why didn't they wake up when the Soviet Union fell? Why didn't they wake up when they saw what happened in Venezuela? People, these ideas feel good to people. The government programs have good intentions. Most people are not like us. They have lives. They don't pay attention to politics all the time. They're thinking sex, fashion, sports, 1,000 other things.
Right.
And those people don't pay close attention to this stuff.
Well, that's why they should pay close attention to you on Stossel TV, folks. John Stossel, thank you so much. I greatly appreciate it. Again, it's Stossel.tv?
Just Stossel TV or
Okay.
johnstossel.com will get you there.
Very good. Thank you so much, John, and thank you for everything you do. And Dave Sussman signing off here at America's Voice News, live at Freedom Fest. Thanks for joining us again, John Stossel. We'll be right back, folks. Cheers. And welcome back, America's Voice News Live. We are here at Freedom Fest 2019. Dave Sussman, your host, and I'm delighted to have returning to our show, Grover Norquist, president of Americans for Tax Reform.
Absolutely. Good to be with you.
Good to have you back. Okay, first of all, I want to get into a couple of issues with you right out of the gate. We are looking at, I had Steve Moore on yesterday.
Yes.
And he was saying, he had an article that came out, I think it was CNBC or somewhere. He was saying that the trade war with China, he's looking at maybe 10 to 15 years for this thing. This is not going to be a quick, done solution, wrapped up nice, neat, and tied bow by the election. What are your thoughts on that?
That's disappointing to hear.
Okay.
Look, tariffs are taxes. They're
Yeah.
taxes that are paid by the American consumer. A tariff war is a war of choice, exactly what the president said he wasn't going to do in terms of wars of choice. I understand the president's unhappiness that China steals our intellectual property. That's not fair trade, or that's just stealing, okay? And we're not going to invade them to stop it. So what do you do? And a tariff was supposed to shock them into getting it right. If that can work, I understand it. If we're just going to be stuck with these tariffs for a long, long time, it's a lot of self-inflicted pain on American consumers and American workers. I do think it's a good idea to encourage American companies that work in Asia, work in Burma. You know, build stuff in Vietnam and Taiwan and someplace other than Mexico, someplace other than China, if China's going to be stealing stuff.
Okay, so let's talk about from a standpoint of a solution orientated. You want to address. You talked about, I think last time on the show, you talked about intellectual property theft, okay, for China.
Yeah.
How do you address these issues without using tariffs, without actually causing pain to bring them to the table?
Step one, you have such rapid growth in the United States and such rapid technological change that even if they steal it, they're behind the curve, okay? We just need to be moving so fast that theft isn't debilitating to what we do. And we can do that if we continue to deregulate. If our economy was growing at 4 or 5% instead of 2 to 3%, we would be leaving China in the dust. That's where we ought to be. And then you can have some conversation about what you do with this mild annoyance, not this looming threat. So get our own acting together. Let's end the abuse of tort law so that 2% of the country lawyers are looting the rest of us every time somebody spills hot coffee on themselves. You know, McDonald's has to charge us all $1 million more for coffee. That nonsense has to end. Organized labor shouldn't be able to force people to pay union dues and join a union as a condition of employment, as they do in 22 states. And all of these things slow economic growth, the thousands and thousands of regulations. Our 21% corporate rate is better than the 35 it used to be, but it's still too high. It should be down closer to 15. So if we do those things, then China becomes less of a challenge and a problem, and I think they would be better negotiating partners.
What do you say to those that feel like China is now coming to the table because obviously their economy is slow, right? I mean, America is right now the beacon of the economic world when it comes to actual results and statistics, but also because they're feeling the pinch, or they may not admit it, but they are coming to the table and things may be done.
Well, if they are, that's good. I'm for that. You were positing that Steve Moore said this could be a 15-year project.
Right.
A 15-year project is not my idea of quick.
Right.
Quick is sometime this summer. Quick. We've been at this for some time. Everybody can project out into the future. We all know what the continued pain on both sides are. Our stock market in the U.S. should be much higher, but we have this unknown uncertainty of tariffs, and tariff wars get bigger. We're threatening a tariff war with Europe as well as with China. There are lots of challenges, and I would really like to get this settled. Now, we may have to come back and visit again, but get this settled so that we can have strong growth between now and the election. If we don't have strong growth between now and the election, you're not going to have pro-growth policies for the next 4 years.
What about Mexico? It's a different situation, but you're always talking about tariffs and trade. They seem to be coming to the table as well now?
Right, but what we're asking them to do is a political decision, and we threaten them with economic violence, economic sanctions, and they came and they fixed it, okay? I think if the threats had been quieter, then we might have gotten just as quick or even faster activity. No government likes to be humiliated and told that we were forced to do this by the Yankees or by somebody else, but that worked, and it got what the president wanted. It certainly probably encourages him to say, I bet I can do it again. And I hope he's right. I just worry that tariffs can be a long-run damaging thing, not a slap in the face to get things going.
So what I'm hearing you say is that you approve of the results of what Trump is doing right now economically, with a caveat.
That tariffs, if they are still here in a year, they become a permanent feature and a permanent tax on consumers. And the stock market's way below where it should be if we didn't have a trade war.
It's bucking up against 30,000, 27.5 right now.
We should be doing much better.
You think so?
Oh, absolutely, yes. And we expected to do much better until the tariffs hit. That's when we basically plateaued and didn't get much growth to speak of.
Okay. What about the, for the flip side of it, we do hear from agriculture, we hear from farmers, we hear from manufacturers. They are complaining as well. How much of that is perception and how much is that reality right now?
With agriculture, it's very real because China's not buying some of our stuff. All of this is fixable, and I hope the president can get a good deal, like they say in the end of The Godfather, and come to an agreement that will stop the pain on both sides, and then we get growing faster. But until that happens, there's good news. The president is poised to do something that will supercharge the economy as much as ending the the trade war. And that is ending the taxation of inflation on capital gains. Now, if you buy a house, you sell it 30, 40 years later, you pay taxes on a lot of inflation and some real gain. You have stock that you've had for a number of years, or a farm, and you sell it, you're saying part of that tax is on inflation, part's on gain. About 40% of what's taxed when people sell stocks is actually inflation.
Okay.
If you bought something in 1970, it's probably 80% inflation for a stock. So what the president's looking to do, and the White House is coming to an agreement on this, but the president says he wants to do it, and all the good guys in the White House are for it, is to say we define cost for calculating capital gains as historic cost, what you paid for it, plus inflation. So the gain is the difference between what you paid for it and what the inflated cost was, the real cost of the product. That dramatically reduces capital gains taxes on everybody. If you're over 55, this will tremendously...
What percentage of the population or in the investing public will this actually have an impact on?
Well, half the public owns houses, half the public is in the stock market, with 401ks and IRAs. They will all benefit. Some would benefit immediately. If you're over 55 and you want to sell something, there's the benefit. If you're 25 and you're buying your first stock, for the rest of your life, that stock will not be, you will not pay taxes on any inflation gains, only on real gains. So your stock today is worth more once this executive order is given than it was before. So it benefits all Americans. It just depends where you are in your life. Are you 20, 40, or 70, as to when you sort of cash out and sell assets, a home, a second home, land, a farm, stock.
Let's go through a SWOT analysis real quick. I'm going to assume that you're going to consider what you just talked about, the capital gains, as a strength, okay? If we go to weakness, would that be trade in your mind right now as far as a threat to the economy?
Well, yeah, because of the uncertainty of the trade. Is it going to continue for 2 weeks or 2 years or 15 years? Yeah.
Okay, so let's go to the O for opportunities. Where does opportunities lie right now for this administration and for the economy over the next...
Continuing deregulation. Continuing deregulation, getting them done out before May of 2020. Anything done before May of 2020 cannot be undone through the Congressional Review Act. We undid 16 of Obama's major...
Those were by executive order, right?
They were executive order, and then we passed a law to say that can never be done again by executive order. Only Congress can revisit those issues. We don't want our stuff hit with that. So we want to get... The president's ordered everybody, get it done by May. Then it will survive scrutiny.
So what was that ratio? It was like 23-24 for every new, for the repeal of 23-24 for every new regulation. Is that about right?
Well, he was saying 2 to 1. They've been doing 10 plus to 1, but it's also really a question of the cost, not the numbers of them, but the cost. One of them, eliminating something Obama wanted, which was to say your car has to get 50 miles to the gallon. It means it has to be made out of tinfoil and be very small, and you can't put your whole family in it. And getting rid of that saves about $500 billion over the lifetime of the issue. Some of that is fewer people killed, because when you require people to have teeny cars that are less safe, they run into a tree, you're more likely to be dead. You also don't buy a new car because it's been made more expensive, so you stay with the old, less safe, clunky cars for longer. So there's a huge challenge on all of these regulations, because you never know how expensive they really are. You've got your best guess. They're all more expensive than they seem, because they're hidden costs to them that redirect capital and labor, and decisions get distorted by these barriers. I think half of the growth in the economy has come from the tax cut and half from deregulation.
This is something I'd love to get into more detail with you down the road again, and maybe we'll have you back on for our full-hour episodes when we have you. So where can folks find you? Remind everybody, HER.org?
HER.org, AmericansForTaxReform.org, and I tweeted at Grover Norquist. Love to work with anybody, everybody. We fight state issues as well as federal ones.
Fantastic. Everybody follow this man, Grover Norquist, ATR.org. It's a fascinating wealth of knowledge and information on everything economics. Thank you, Grover Norquist, and we'll be right back here. Dave Sussman at Freedom Fest for America's Voice News. America's Voice News. Dave Sussman here at Freedom Fest 2019, and we are having some fun. And one of the things that a lot of folks here at Freedom Fest are enjoying is the art show here at Freedom Fest. And one of the biggest artists in the world, certainly at Freedom Fest, is Michael Ramirez. Two-time Pulitzer Award winner Michael Ramirez, and you can find him at the Las Vegas Review-Journal. Michael, welcome.
Thanks. I think artist is the nicest thing I've been called all week.
Cartoonist.
Political cartoonist.
Political cartoonist.
Other names that we can't mention on air.
But
Yes.
But the fact is that what you are doing is art. And when you take a look at what you're doing, you're not only mixing the art in a cartoon form, but you're mixing it with culture and politics.
Right.
And let me first ask you this, because we've talked about this before. Tell us a little bit about the process, because you are so timely. You just did hit something today on the manhole thing, right?
Right.
So explain how that works. You come up with this idea, and how does it get to press and meet so quickly?
Well, Dave, because today with cable television and news, before you used to have a 72-hour shelf life for any news story. Now it's just immediate. And so whenever something kind of catches my fancy, it usually becomes a topic for debate.
Yeah.
But this is done like any other editorial writer. We digest the news, we substantiate our point of view, then comes the creative process of thinking of how we communicate that idea to the general public. And humor, I think, is a very, very powerful tool to reach the audience. Because when it comes down to it, I believe in political cartooning as serious journalism, but we're trying to influence as many people as we can. We don't want to just offend the audience, that'll happen, but we want to make them aware, be the catalyst for thought, catalyst for debate.
Right. You've got incredible feedback. You've got fans from all over the world. You've got a couple of books that you've done on all of your art.
I'm hated.
And you are hated. But we were just chatting before we went on air, and you're now at the Las Vegas Review-Journal. You've been all over the place, Los Angeles Times, Investors Business Daily. But you said something which absolutely intrigued me, and you said to me that Las Vegas Review-Journal, which is owned by Sheldon Adelson?
Yes.
Okay. It is the one newspaper that's hiring people now. They're expanding. In a world of journalism today, when everybody is getting laid off, what is going on, and what is that secret sauce?
We have the best publisher in the world, Keith Moyer. And Keith is going against the common trend, and he's getting the best journalists. And as soon as he sees a paper closing, if there are star journalists on that staff, we're adding them to the Las Vegas Review-Journal.
Right.
We want to be the preeminent newspaper. For constitutional conservatism, our editorial page is fantastic, but the body of the newspaper is wonderful too. It's objective, straight down the line journalism. We're doing stories in the Review-Journal that are exposing things, having the legislature address these concerns, passing laws and fixing things.
Right.
That's what journalism's all about. I've got to say, I looked at a bunch of newspapers. I'm proud to be part of this team. I feel honored to be here. Sheldon owns the newspaper.
He's a big conservative donor.
He is, absolutely. But you know what? He's really got a hands-off view on the newspaper. Of course, he owns it, so he will come up with the presidential endorsements. But Glenn Cook, the executive editor, Keith Moyer, the publisher, they put together a great package. And it's funny, because I take the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times and the LA Times and the Orange County Register. You could stack the Register and the LA Times together, and they're not nearly as thick as a Review-Journal. There's some great journalism that's going on.
Yeah.
I recommend to my readers not only to get it from my cartoons, but to get it for a good depth of the news. The newspapers have taken on this idea that somehow digested news format is going to compete against television. But what people want is they want in-depth coverage. And the Review-Journal does that better than anybody else.
Yeah. So you talked about stuff in the newspaper, and the Las Vegas Review-Journal is very open. They want their viewers to make up their own minds. But we're seeing a lot of censorship right now. And not just censorship in, obviously, with the things that we could say that are in the media and the newspapers, but if we go worldwide, a couple of years ago we had, Charlie Hebdo?
Yeah.
Okay, and political cartoonists. The Office was shot up because they published the Muhammad cartoon, right? I think it's been 2 years, maybe a little bit longer.
Longer, I think.
What has been the residual effect of that in your industry?
Well, I think some people have shied away from controversial topics. I've not.
Okay.
And I'm a big believer in the First Amendment, and I think, although I would never probably draw on Muhammad because I think the controversy surrounding that image would overshadow any point that I'm trying to make, I'm a big believer in the First Amendment right. And you know, this fundamental right of communication, this has been something that the Western culture has adopted for many, many years. And here in the United States, it's what sets us apart as an extraordinary country, because we can have the dissemination of ideas, we can have a debate about issues.
Yeah.
There's a big trend of political correctness that's going on right now. I always tell my audiences I would much rather be constitutionally correct than politically correct. America ought to see all the different voices out there, all the different points of view. And look, people are going to go off the reservation and say outlandish things, but there are consequences to do that. I mean, you have a First Amendment right to say whatever you want. You don't have a First Amendment right not to bear the consequences of that. And when you have extreme statements, well, it exposes itself for what it is. And it is more revelatory toward the person, saying these things. And there will be consequences for that as well.
Are you concerned about this trend that we see? And I don't necessarily think it's a trend. It's just a kind of a status quo fact now of bias in the media.
I've been concerned about that for a long time.
Yeah. And you comment on it in your cartoons.
Absolutely. We can get into what I call the 3 pillars of influence later on, but I'll tell you what. I think this has been one of the reasons why journalists and journalism isn't trusted. In fact, if you look on polls, we sometimes fall below politicians.
Right.
When you think about that, as far as credibility goes, and they've undermined their ability to make a pitch to say this is our view of the world. This is what is happening in the world.
Yeah.
When everybody knows there's a certain bias tied up in it. I'm on the editorial page. I think it's kind of funny when people call me up and they say, you're way too opinionated, and I have to say, well, that's why I'm on the opinion page.
Yeah.
It's a separate entity from the body of the newspaper, though. The reader ought to have expectations that they can pick up a story and get a world-rounded, an eyewitness view of events, and both points of view, and not a subjective exercise where the reporter is deciding how they feel about the events and forcing the readers to adopt their view.
You're very much focused on, again, as I mentioned earlier in our discussion, the politics of the day. What do you make about the Squad, AOC, as you refer to? I think
Right.
the other day you said,
Yeah.
Alexandria, occasional cortex. Was that you?
No, it wasn't me. I wish I'd thought of that. But you know what? What's been great about this, it's been very revelatory as far as what the long-term
Yeah.
goals of the Democratic Party are going to be.
Right.
You could say it's a gift that keeps on giving.
Yeah.
Every time she makes a pronouncement, the Trump re-election effort goes up 20 points. And when you think about it, I mean, the president right now is in a pretty vulnerable state. He won Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania by less than 0.4%.
Right.
7 other states by less than 1.4% margin, with a Green candidate in there. In the last election cycle, he lost most of those states. And yet, out of the 23 knuckleheads that are running on the other side, they can't find somebody who can square off with Trump and overcome this vulnerable president. And it's
Yeah.
because you have a faction within the Democratic Party that's espousing these kind of fringe ideas. $23 trillion in national debt, and then we'll just toss in another, $1.2 trillion for giving college passes, or
Right.
another $70 trillion for health care. The average American can see through all this stuff.
Gotcha.
And so I say, AOC, keep on speaking.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
the numbers for the conservative movement are just going to go up.
Great. Last minute here. Folks can find you and find all of your artwork. If they're not in Las Vegas, where can they see it?
Well, of course, you can get the Review Journal online.
Right.
You could go to michaelpramirez.com. You could Google Ramirez and cartoons, and
Yeah.
when you get past all the profanity, you'll eventually get to the cartoon.
Not your profanity.
No. And of course, you can always see me on episode 23 of America's Most Wanted. Although I think you can only see my pant
Gotcha.
leg as I'm going over the
All right,
fence.
Michael P. Ramirez, folks. Find him online everywhere. He's fantastic and a good friend. Thank you so much
Thanks,
for joining us. And we'll be right back here at America's Voice News from Freedom Fest Live. I'm Dave Sussman.
Wow. I hope you enjoyed that as much as we enjoyed interviewing these incredible people, incredible minds. They are changing the culture. They're changing the economy. They're changing politics. And you're right there to watch them with us. So thanks for joining us. We greatly appreciate you joining us. You can find Whiskey Politics on YouTube. Make sure you hit the subscribe and the notification bell. That way you get updated on all of our upcoming interviews. And find us all across social media. America's Voice News is on Facebook, as well as Whiskey Politics, The Dave Sussman Show. And you can find me at Dave Sussman on Twitter. Until next time, thanks for joining us. Cheers.